Hey everybody, it's Steve with Sky 194, and I appreciate you stopping by my channel. And today we're having another pros and cons, and this time it's with the Huracan, the Lamborghini Huracan EVO GT3 car. And of course, I have some time driving this car. It's one of my favorite cars, so I know a little more about this one than maybe some of the other ones. Even though I far from know everything. It's definitely a little tricky monster sometimes, but let's go over some of the pros and cons, go over some of the setup tips and driving tips and things like that, and also I will go over the setup to this track afterwards, and then I will leave the link to the setup in the description. And all my new setups now for the new update will have a 6 next to it, so it'll be Sky 6 and anything after that, but anything after the update 1.6 it will have that 6 next to it. The other setups, they still work, but they could need a little tweaking here and there. They could be fine driving, but they might be off a few tenths from what I've been checking as far as the times, and a couple little adjustments, and then they're right back where they were. But it's just that's why everything I do now, I want to make sure it's has this Sky 6 on it, so everybody knows it's from the update, since the update. But let's start with the cons first. There's really not a lot. The Huracan is such a great car, and it has so many. It's got some goods and bads, but I mean, really, as far as the cons, there's, like I said, there's not a lot. The first one I would say is hard to be consistent. The cars, it's just one of these cars that gets a little bit of an attitude, and you really gotta be just totally focused, and you can't even have a teeny lapse anywhere in any part of the track to just even try to be close to being consistent, because it's just a car. If you're not super consistent, it'll just make it even worse. That's just that way with the car. The tire wear, mainly the rear. Usually the tire wear on the rear accelerates wearing. It always wears faster than the front with that big V10 in it. It just wants to burn them off. So it's just so easy, and that might be some of the problems with the being inconsistent. It's just so easy to get them worn down and just burn them off, and really quick, and then times have a big fall off, kind of like falling off a diving board or something. So it's really tough on that. So it's something you got to keep in mind when you're setting the car up, and also when you're in the race. The other day, I just posted the video multiplayer, and I was racing at Paul Ricard with the Lamborghini, and I kind of overdrove the car, and I was kind of overdriving it in the beginning. And of course, that's another thing, with the 2020 tires, they're a little more not forgiving when it's cold. I mean, when the tires are cold and they're not up to temperature. I mean, it takes a good 2 laps before the tires really start working. So, you start just trying to go out like a jackrabbit and get going, which, everybody's trying to get going to get an advantage. And you can end up making some pretty easy mistakes really quick, because the car just won't do it. Or, you overdrive it, it'll just bite you really quick. So, there's not a lot of forgiveness there. So, and then once I settled down and just started, let's see what I can do, and just start putting in laps, and I was, putting in decent laps, and, ended up catching 3rd place, and was able to, get a 3rd place out of it, which I had to make up some time over the 45-minute race. But it was, it just had to just, in the beginning, I lost all kinds of time. So it's just one of those things that, you got to take it easy with the tires, especially until they get up to temperature, and overall driving, depending upon, what the length of the race is, or your pit stops, or those kinds of things. it's also a little harder to get the setup just right. So sometimes with the Lamborghini, it's just you're trying to get that feel, and it's a little bit different than some of the other cars as far as what you're trying to get out of it. Um, kind of going on with the setup tips, you kind of want it to have a little bit of understeer in the beginning just because of the rear tires. But that's the thing about getting the feel right. If you get it to really go right and get it to handle and rotate just the way I want to anyway, then what happens is you go, 10, 15 minutes, and then the car just starts falling off a cliff and you start losing time really quick. So those are things you have to kind of prepare for in the beginning when you're setting it up, and kind of understand that's why the car is doing that. Those are the cons. Let's go to the pros. The pros, it's got good straightaway speed. Lamborghini is really strong at Paul Ricard, Monza. Anything with a decent straightaway, it's usually can hold its own there. It's just it's I'm not saying it's at the top, but it's definitely in the top half of the field. It's got really good brakes. The car can stop and with the best of them. I mean, there might be a couple cars that I could say that maybe has a little bit better brakes than the Lamborghini, but again, it's in the top half of the field. So again, there's a lot of things that might not be the absolute best at, but it's right there in a lot of areas as far as right there in the top half of the field. Another thing, it's decent over bumps. I'm not saying it's great. There's cars that are better than that, but if you compare this car to the Ferrari or compare this car to the Honda, things like that, it's definitely better over bumps than those cars by far. And again, that leads into the next thing, the chassis. Next pro. The chassis is really good, and I think it's one of those things that's a combination. It's not loose, it's not flexing, but it's not super stiff either. It's got a good combination of something that works, something that is just right. It's not either way. Like the Ferrari, I think is maybe a little over stiff, but when you get this car, it just has a good balance of being flexing enough, but not over flexing. It's got good acceleration. That's another pro. I mean, again, it's not at the top of the field. There's other cars that accelerate better, but it's not bad. I mean, it's again, it's in the top half of the field, and it's no slouch on acceleration, and that's always a really good thing to have, a plus to have for a car. If you're coming off a turn, you just need it. You need that little acceleration squirt. You really just go ahead, and that's what it has. It has that most of the time because of the way the gears are, and that's another pro. It's got really good gear ratios in the car to where you get those accelerations off the corners a lot of times, and first gear is a very usable gear in a lot of the tighter turns. It's not too low, it's not too high, so it just seems to me that they got the right gear ratio spread out just right all the way for top speed or for all the different corners. It's a good variety of ratios to where it's not out of place. The car has a great feeling mid-corner. That's one of the things that I really get attracted to with this car. I just think it has a really great mid-feeling to the car. And I really think that it's some of the best as far as, you have like maybe the Audi, which of course is like a sister car, but not a lot of cars have the mid-corner feel that this does. McLaren is really good too with that, but again, it's got a really good, you can really feel the car rotate and just turn and you can get on the gas earlier, and that's a good positive to have. Now the setup tips and driving. Again, it takes more negative camber than most of the other cars, or at least up near the top of the list anyway. And of course with 2020, they're limited to -4, so you're going to be up around there most of the time, with the front anyway. And of course, like I talked about before, with the setup in the neutral, it's you got to be a little bit neutral or almost on the understeery side when you first, with brand new tires. Just because you're going to wear the rear tires faster, and then the car is going to get looser as you go. So if you got to really a balancing act of doing that, of getting it neutral or a little understeery. Also, you want to make sure you run enough preload on the diff. It's not extreme like the Ferrari is, but you definitely still want to make sure you run enough preload on it, to keep the back end happy. As far as the driving and some other tips, again, just like anything else, my mistake, try not to overdrive it like I did when I was in a multiplayer. I mean, you really, especially in the beginning, you just kind of got to let the car do its thing, wait for it to come in, and just, let the car do the work instead of, basically trying to push it beyond what it's, going to do. Turning ratio is at 500. That's what I have at this, and it seemed to help again with the turning, because this is one, Lamborghinis, when you got to turn it a little more than I like. And again, that's a personal preference. It might be fine for you, but it just seemed to me it helped me a little bit out with turning it at keeping the steering ratio at 500. Also, I let the car coast through the mid corner or through the entry to mid corner. Don't be afraid. Don't need to ride the brake in. You don't the trail. You can just, if you get into it, just go in there and let off and let it go through there. It will the cars will handle it, and you'll drop some time that way. Try not to if you don't have to. The trail brake or going through the corner to try to get the car. You don't need to get it to help to rotate. That's part of my problem trying to get it to overdrive, trying to get the car to over rotate and trail braking a little bit, and it ends up just the back end sliding and all kinds of stupid things. So don't want to do that. On the 2020 tires, I really think as an improvement for this car, I think it helps this car more than maybe some other cars. I really do. I don't know if it's the construction of the tire. I don't know if it's, the compound of the tire or what it is. But I think it does. The 2020 tires do help a little bit with the consistency and do help a little bit with the overall feel of the car. So that's a good thing. The only negative probably of it is just the first lap or two. You really got to be on guard and dial it down, and with the new tires. But that's with all the cars. But definitely with the Lamborghini for sure. As far as the tracks, this is a car that I don't care where you go. It can be in the winner's circle or on the podium. I mean, it's got performance to where it can be there, no problem. Now, the only track that I can say that I don't have it really dialed in yet is Imola. I have run some laps there with it, just trying to get a base kind of going with it, and it's doing decent, but it's definitely still not where it needs to be. And I've heard some people say that it seems like Imola's more of a front engine track, front engine car track, which it might be, because it seems like the front engine cars do a little bit better there. But I mean, I really can't say because I don't have the thing all done yet. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So I really don't know. But really, at all these other tracks, it's great at Zolder. It's great at Hungaroring, Monza, Paul Ricard, Misano. You know, Barcelona. I just don't really see any track even it does, you know, decent at Brands Hatch. Maybe Laguna Seca. That I don't know about. I'm not really sure about Laguna Seca. I know it does good at Suzuka and Kalami. Um, like I said, there's really any track is going to be good for that. So I really don't see. It's mainly just getting the car set up to work, and it should be. It might not be the greatest car there, but it still should be. You know, one of the near in the top of the field. It still should be up there somewhere, if the car is set up correctly. Um, and of course, you know, how can you not like the sounds and the looks of the car? I mean, the car is absolutely gorgeous. In pretty much any livery. And one thing I've always liked about the Lamborghini is just the sound of the car. I mean, the V10 is just like the Audi. It's the same motor, but I mean, they absolutely just sound awesome. And you know, between the downshifts and just the sound of that motor, it's something that's really fun to drive, to listen to all the time. So that's one reason probably I like it. I'm just, you know, whether the performance of it's, you know, what I get out of it, I love to hear it. So that's probably one of my downfalls, but that's just me. But let's go over the setup for this. And I did like 15 laps. So trying to make sure that I wanted to make sure the setup was consistent before I gave it to you guys. So let's go over that. And let's go to the timetables first. There's a timetable. So there I went, well, 14 laps. I did 14 laps, and you can see they were all legal. My best was a 1:45.03. But you can see, look at all the 45s. I mean, the worst was a 45.6, I think. No, 45.8. A 45.8 was the worst, and a 45.0 was my best. So that's within 8/10. And those were just driver error, not the car. Because right after that, I did it back down to a 1:45.17 and a 45.45. So, I mean, that was just a drive, my error. But, I mean, for me, personally, with the Lamborghini, that is really good for me with Lamborghini. So not to say time-wise, but just the consistency of it. I mean, I've run 44s here with the Lamborghini. So I know it also depends on the fuel load. I had 65 liters on, so that's about the same time, and that's about a tenth there. So right there, if I would have had just this here, I would have been a 44.9. So again, that's not bad for that much fuel, and these conditions, I don't think it's too bad, not for me anyway. So let's go over the setup. And the setup's 25.9 left front, 25.5 left rear, 27.4 right front, and 26.8 right rear. And the rear always is less pressure than the front. That's another thing for the setup. Tips is that always wears the rear tires more, so you need to always have lower pressure on the rears than the front. And actually, I needed to go up probably one or two up on this left front. The toe on the front is negative 0.1 with the camber at negative 3.8 on the left front and negative 3.6 on the right front. The caster was 13.5, and on the rear the toe was 0.12. And the camber was negative 2.9 on the left rear and negative 2.8 on the right rear. Electronics were 3 and 4 and 1. Fuel 65 liters with the number 1 brake pad. And there's the wear. I had light graining on the right front, but just that, and that could have been anything. But everything else looks really good after that many laps. And you can see the wear is little, and that's actually not bad for the Lamborghini, because usually it wears the rear really bad over the front. And that is definitely more than the front, but it's not terrible. So that's actually not real bad. So the mechanical, anti-roll bar 7, brake bias is 58. The springs on the front are 190,000. with a bump stop rate of 1100 on the left front and 1000 on the right front, and bump stop range of 2. And on the rear, the springs are 154,000 with a bump stop rate of 600 on the left rear and 500 on the right rear, and a bump stop range of 8 on the left rear and 12 on the right rear. Then the roll bar is 5, and the preload on the diff is 110, and that's definitely important. Shocks are on the front 20, 17, 25, and 22, and on the rear it's 19, 16, 24, and 20. Aero, I have 58 in the front, 61 in the back, with a 6 rear wing and a 3 and a 3 and a brake ducts, which actually I probably should have had it 4 and 4. I'll probably make that 4 and 4 because that's most of the time I'm have it that way. And this is definitely with the brake ducts, you definitely want it even because the rears are going to get just as hot as the fronts, so or if not hotter. So you definitely want to keep the brake ducts on this one not staggered but even, to try to keep that rear tire as cool as you can. So that is the setup for this, and again I have it again with the Sky 6, and that designates that it's past the update 1.6. So that's the only way I could figure out how to do it, so everybody would know. I sure hope you enjoyed the video. If you would help support the channel, a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. It really helps with all the YouTube stuff. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I love feedback or comments, any comments or feedback. I love talking to everybody and what you're all doing and what you guys are racing or what tracks you like or what car you like. That. And I just love talking about sim racing and ACC and all those things. So I sure hope I hear from somebody, and I sure hope you come back and visit real soon. Y'all take care. See ya.